You ever been with a woman who has weird pronouns before?
I can't say that I have.
Well then, sugar, you haven't lived.
Note to self, I don't want to live.
What is up, space pirates? This is your Admiral, the mercifully merciless Dr. Disaster, and the crying and whining over the EA buyout by all of the woke progressives out there has been simply glorious over the past few weeks. As we have looked at on this channel, the Redditors have been especially butthurt about the Saudis and the son-in-law of Donald Trump essentially now owning EA. Here is some of the shit that they have been saying.
The Saudis and Jared Kushner will now control not just the games, but any data you gave or will give to EA. Do with that what you will. Saudi and Kushner? What a collab! I hate this! I wouldn't be surprised if EA just slowly dies off. I just wanted Mass Effect. It's funny they have FIFA 26 and Battlefield 6, which both seem great. Then this happens. Wow, EA's games are gonna go from bad to terrible real quick.
Dirty Turkish hark back flatten Fortin Philip Bucket Martin Perkaluma Bert.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, the pissing and moaning from that crowd, who were thrilled with games like Dragon Age the Veilguard and Battlefield 5 because it kowtowed to their weird shitlib worldview, the pissing and moaning from them never gets old. But there is also a business component to all of this as well. Of course, Bioware has long been one of the worst performing elements under the EA umbrella, and after the high-profile failure of Dragon Age the Veilguard, long before this EA buyout, there was a lot of speculation that EA would cut Bioware out of their company like a body part that no longer functions. Well, now analysts are speculating that yes, actually, EA is going to do that after this buyout happens, which will leave the company in massive debt. They are going to need to bring in big money to pay off that debt. And word on the street is that Bioware will be on the chopping block to be sold off in order to help pay for it. But here's my question. Who in the flying hell would be crazy enough to buy this shit sandwich?
Take it. I don't want it. Take it. I don't want it.
Alright, me hearties, make sure that you hit the like button on this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I've had a lot of people tell me that they have been unwillingly unsubscribed to the channel, so make sure you check on that, and also, give me a follow over on X, where my handle is Dr. Disaster1, and if you feel like supporting the channel and helping keep the lights on, consider becoming a member for as little as $5 per month. Anyhow, let's look at this news that Bioware might be sold off. To be clear, if this does happen, any buyout would have to include the IP that Bioware develops, like Mass Effect and Dragon Age. The studio itself is basically worth jack crap. They currently have less than 100 developers working there, and they have not made a game that was a hit in over a decade. The Veilguard was a massive dud. Anthem was a laughingstock. even Mass Effect Andromeda was a turd that most people did not care for, the most recent success that they've had was Dragon Age Inquisition all the way back in 2014. Ever since, these guys have become a shell of their former selves, forced to run on a skeleton crew because they messed everything up so bad with Dragon Age the Veilguard, resulting in a ton of layoffs. Now, one thing to note, the studio itself no longer owns their own intellectual properties. Those IP are owned by EA. My guess is that any sell-off involving Bioware would actually be for the franchises themselves and not the studio which develops those franchises. And this means that any sell-off might actually mean the closing down of Bioware in the wake of such a deal. That is my speculation, that something like that will happen. But let's read about the speculation of this analyst who seems to think Bioware would make a prime candidate to be sold. This article here comes from GameSpot. It says here, near the end of September, EA disclosed a $55 billion deal to take the third-party video game publisher private under a new ownership group, including Saudi Arabia's public investment fund, Jared Kushner's affinity partners, and the private equity firm Silver Lake. It's also the largest leveraged buyout of all time, and it will require EA to settle $20 billion in debt. According to several prominent analysts, the fastest way for EA to reach that number is by shedding studios and selling some of them off. But once again, who the hell wants to buy a studio like Bioware? Last we knew, there were somewhere around 75 people working at the company. And their major franchises, both Dragon Age and Mass Effect, even if those were packaged in with the deal, which they surely would have to be in order to be able to sell the studio off, but even if they were, there has been so much damage done to these properties that I don't know how valuable they even are at this point. If I owned Dragon Age, I would want to immediately decanonize the Veilguard and work on telling a proper follow-up to Inquisition. But the problem is, that sort of thing becomes messy, creating alternate timelines, that sort of thing. The cleanest method of fixing the Dragon Age universe would probably be some kind of reboot. But then, you have to ask yourself, why would I want to be shackled to this IP and not start up a brand new franchise? I suppose the name recognition is important, but suffice to say, the value of these franchises has strongly diminished. Anyhow, reading on. According to a report by Polygon, multiple analysts believe that Bioware is a prime candidate to be sold because of the studio's struggles over the last decade. Bioware's Dragon Age the Veilguard fell far below EA's expectations, and the studio was hit by numerous layoffs in the aftermath. A much smaller team at the studio is currently working on the next Mass Effect title, which may entice potential buyers. Yeah, I don't know about that. The last Mass Effect game, which players actually enjoyed, was all the way back in 2012. Anyhow, the article says next, EA is currently throwing its promotional muscle behind Battlefield 6, the first-person shooter that's competing with Activision's Call of Duty franchise. While that may mean DICE, the developer of the game's multiplayer mode, is safe from being sold at the moment, analysts suggest that could change if Battlefield 6 underperforms. And for the record, Battlefield just released this weekend, and it definitely did not underperform. But anyhow, since The Sims 4 is one of EA's top-earning games, the analysts believe Maxis is likely safe from being sold off. However, DFC Intelligence President David Cole believes that even Maxis could be sold if a premium offer was made by an outside buyer. He also predicted that there will be sizable layoffs at EA studios, regardless of whether they are purchased by other companies. Leveraged buyouts are historically followed by cutbacks and the sale of non-essential assets in the short term, Cole told Polygon. Long term, this can allow a company like EA to focus on more creative, risky ventures as they are not beholden to public shareholders, but short term, we expect them to focus more on core money generators and look to get top dollar for secondary IP/products. And with that in mind, I think a better studio to sell off for EA beyond Bioware would be something like Motive, which did some work on Battlefield 6, and they put out the Dead Space remastered game a few years back. They also are responsible for Star Wars Battlefront 2, which saw a resurgence in interest this past year. This is a studio which seems to have some actual value, and if EA shopped it around with, say, the Dead Space IP, they might actually have some takers. Not that Bioware wouldn't have anybody interested in them at all, mind you. I'm sure there would be interest in the studio, but I think that interest would be quite tepid. Basically, the Dragon Age the Veilguard flop happened at the worst possible time for the new owners of EA. The failure of the studio is still fresh in everyone's minds. In fact, the Veilguard is often held up as the standard for woke games that fail miserably, so their value will be at an all-time low. But to be perfectly clear, despite all of the reasons I'm spouting off as to why Bioware isn't worth anywhere near as much as they might have been in previous years, I do actually believe that a buyout from another company seems likely. What would be hilarious, though, is if a big juggernaut company like, I don't know, Take-Two Interactive, just as an example. Not necessarily them, but someone like them. It would be hilarious, though, if someone like that took a chance on Bioware with the understanding that all of the so-called legions of Dragon Age fans were worried that they could no longer infest their games with LGBT sludge any longer. It won last year's Game of the Year award at the Gaming Award show, and no, that isn't me making fun of them, that's the actual name of that award show. But it would be funny if someone bought the franchise thinking that style of game had loads of fans and thinking that they were rescuing it, and then they put out another Veilguard style game and found out the hard way that the Veilguard was not an aberration. As a Schadenfreude enthusiast, I must confess that is almost the outcome I'm hoping for. It would be hysterical to behold, but I'm gonna leave it there. What do you make of this news? Do you think EA will abandon Bioware? And if not, then what studios do you think will be sold off by EA after the buyout finalizes? Surely some of them will be sold, but drop your thoughts into the comment section below, and we will talk there. Thanks for watching, me hearties. If you haven't already, your Admiral is inviting you to subscribe to the channel and become a part of the crew. Life as a space pirate may not be glamorous, but there's always plenty of booty.